Do you want to make money with your forest or acreage, especially in a rural area? Hi, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. I want you to step back a little bit. Maybe you've just inherited a piece of land. Maybe you've bought land that has timber on it. I would like you to step back just a second to think about your goals and objectives with that piece of land. Do you want to timber the land to get cash out today? Do you want the land to be available for family recreation? Do you want to hunt on the land? Do you want regular cash flow from that land? See, land provides a lot of different opportunities to people. So you've bought the land, it can do all these things for you. But have you ever thought about what you can do for the land to increase its value over time, not only with biodiversity, but the recreational and habitat benefits that you can receive? Now, this isn't some tree hugging whatever. I do believe land needs to serve the owners of that land. But if you don't steward that land, there won't be any value to receive. Here's a simple example. You can have three trees, all the same age, but due to soil conditions, shade or light conditions, placement north south of the property, a lot of other factors can cause all three trees of the same age to be different diameters. So that means one tree could be fat and round like a giant Coke bottle, like a 2-liter bottle of Coke, nice and round. And it's like that in 5 years or 4 years. And the other tree of the same species is like a soda can or smaller. And the other one's the size of a pencil. Now, the reason for this is the environmental conditions around that tree cause the tree to grow fast or to grow slow. If you want optimal growth from your trees, you're going to lean towards an ecologically sound property management technique. That it's not just one technique, it's cultivating and stewarding the ecosystem so the tree is as healthy as possible, because healthy trees are more resistant from insects, pests, storm damage, or much more. Now, if you're not thinking this way, that's okay. I understand a lot of homeowners are more interested in the aesthetics. But if you've got a small farm or a homestead and you're looking for retirement value from your property, you don't necessarily have to wait 20 years. There are things you can do in the short term, especially in your design plan, to cultivate areas of your property. And it doesn't necessarily require a lot of inputs because, again, I want you to have that free net cash flow, but things you can do to make the land respond faster according to its natural conditions. So sometimes you'll hear me say it in the videos. I want to find out what this land is expressing itself as. Like, for example, what stage of succession is this forest in right now? Is it a new forest? Is it an old growth forest? What kind of conditions has it been in the past? What kind of conditions might it be in the future? I want to put all those things together to have that land serve you. So I attended a program tonight on forestry, and one of the things that really caught my attention is that the majority of national parks in the United States today, 100 years ago, had no trees on them. See, in the First Nation folks over here, they didn't cut down trees unless they absolutely had to, because they didn't necessarily have the tools to do it. They had a smaller population. They tended to be more opportunist about their agriculture because they were getting a lot of their food from the forest itself. But when the European settlers came over here, they were used to a degraded landscape in Europe. But in their minds, that degraded landscape was normal. So that's stone fences or stone walls, a lot of grassland, a lot of animals and cultivated, domesticated animals that needed open spaces. But the United States, especially in the mid-Atlantic area where I'm at, was thick, deep forests. It was a different place. Now, in their mind, they thought they needed to turn the forest into what they're used to because they have agricultural equipment. They're used to growing in fields. They have wooden homes that required timber versus a lot of the First Nations folks had. They had wooden homes, but they were built with smaller sized resources and they were renewable over time rather than a once and done stone structure or timber frame structure. So what had happened is after the settlers came over here, pretty much every tree in Virginia and all along the 13 colonies was removed. There were no trees. And to the point where trees used for firewood, trees used for timber, trees used for machining products, trees as an export, eventually they ran out of trees. Now, there is an old wives' tale that we could run out of trees today if we cut them all down, but forest management practices today, even the worst of our management practices, are better than they were 250 years ago. But it was about 100 years in before a lot of this land was farmed. So the trees were all cut down. They ran out of tree resources. So they went looking for coal. They went looking for oil. Now, these where there were trees, it became croplands, a lot of tobacco being grown. The land was heavily degraded. Now, it wasn't because they were, European settlers, because of the mindset and the understanding of the environment. They didn't first go do a survey and understand their land before they started doing stuff to it. But ultimately, what happened here is the trees were depleted, and then agricultural activity depleted the nutrients in the soil, and other resources were available, so they didn't have to burn trees for wood and fuel and such as that. And the trees started to grow back. But these lands that were heavily degraded were sold to the federal government. So about 100 years ago, the U.S. government had this park system approach. The U.S. government paid for the restoration of that land in a variety of different ways, including exclusion by owning the land and excluding it. The government is paying for that land because they have park service and they have, different things that they're doing with it. But the trees recovered. So if you go to a national park today and you're wandering through the forest, those trees are only 50 to 100 years old, maybe even less, because again, it is a managed environment. Now, what is the lesson here? Well, if you get a piece of land from grandpa, he's died, and you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to cut them trees down and get my money, you're only going to get about $1,000 to $1,500 an acre. Now, after you pay your taxes on it, after you pay the restoration costs, you're going to be down to maybe $800 an acre. Now, that's good value, but you can only do that once every 20 years or so. So if you take the $800, you divide it by 20 years, that's how much you get per acre per year. So if you're simply looking at it, let's say you get $800 an acre, and you're going to divide that by 20 years, you're getting about $40 per year per acre. Now, what if that same land today could produce $40 per acre today, and you didn't have to cut down the trees? See, that's the mindset that we cultivate here at Prosperity Homestead. If you can acquire land, we can show you how to cash flow that land without destroying it. And in fact, when you add to that land the value of ecosystem, so a nice ecosystem would start with insects and move its way all the way through what we call game animals. Your nice, beautiful deer with them, the nice, 8-point antlers, 4-point antlers. A nice set of predators. We're a little hesitant about the predators, the wolves, the bears, the larger animals, but that is a sign of a healthy ecosystem. And when the animals in that ecosystem have enough food, enough shelter, and enough movement, you're going to have excellent hunting land. What if you could get $75, $100 for a hunting license and bring yourself up to $40 an acre, $30 an acre, $20 an acre? What if there was, and this is where we get into the homesteading skills, what if there were agricultural activities that you could do? You can still keep that full-time job, but what if there are agricultural activities you can do on your homestead that would lower your cost of operations? And I know I speak in a business language, but again, this is a world that is paved by money. The world moves around by money, and if you don't pay the taxes on that land, you will lose it. So at least let's have a goal of getting that land to pay for itself, to have a free net cash flow, so that if you want to improve the land, you can afford to do so. Now, I also look at it this way. Your grandparents, your parents had bought that land for purpose. They used that land for purpose. There's a legacy there. There's a stewardship that's required to honor them. Now, I do know that there's a lot of places where the kids just cash out. That's very short-minded. The reason I talk to about how indigenous populations manage the land versus how we manage it today, we're not going to jump back to an indigenous management system. There's too many people. There's too many valuable resources that the land can use. There's too many things that we failed to do all these generations. But you can take a piece of land and put it into not a legal conservation, but a conservation of resources that supports your immediate family. That's homesteading. You can put it into a design plan, such as a permaculture design plan, so that you have different zones that serve different purposes. I was just reading over a report I got from a conservation biologist that came out and looked at a piece of land that I'm managing, and we found 4 areas that the slope's not very good for doing any agriculture. The conditions are not ideal for timbering or anything like that, that we're going to create exclusion areas. Now, these exclusion areas buffer the wildlife, gives them a place to habitate. It buffers traffic from the road. It provides some kind of a sound barrier. It provides a carbon sink for the property. It does so many things, but this is land I couldn't do anything with anyway. Do you see how this works? We can take a piece of land, divide it up into zones, divide it up into segments, and show you how to generate 20, 30, 50, $100 an acre year after year for the rest of your life. Now, does that mean that you'll never timber the land? No, no, you still may timber the land because that is part of the nature of the property, but you may not cut down all 40 acres. You may do 5 acres this year, 5 acres next year, and go through a succession plan that gives you a variety of different forest habitats for a broader spectrum of animals. Now, I've worked with a number of people that are cultivating their land for recreational hunting or family camping. Well, in the case of a piece of land here in this Mid-Atlantic region, sometimes simply using a forest mulcher and cutting trails on your property opens the land up, gives you the opportunity to do family camping, to do hunting, but doesn't disturb any of the natural forest. It gives you an immediate use of the land, but it gives you a way of seeing the land and how it is and what it wants to be and what kinds of trees do you have. Do you have mixed hardwoods? Do you have pines? Do you have scrub pines? Do you all those different levels of forest? Do they exist, and how can we help them with their expression to serve both the needs of the wildlife and yourself? Now, a lot of folks will say, Justin, man, that sounds an awful lot like tree hugging, and that's okay. I might hug a tree here and there, but if you don't have a complete ecosystem, you're not going to have the healthy game animals. You're not going to have the healthy mid-level animals like rabbits and stuff like that. And I know that a lot of the culture says to you that you don't want rabbits, you don't want foxes. If you have a chicken coop, you don't want possums, rabbits, raccoons. Well, rabbits are not going to bother your chickens, but they'll dig holes that a possum will come through later or a raccoon will come through later. You don't want foxes and stuff. But you could build a better chicken coop if you have the cash flow to drive a property past break even. The majority of farms today, especially small farms, are losing money. They often require both adults to work full time, and they struggle when you have to drive into town. So you have all these extra expenses driving into town to work. Now, fortunately, technology allows us to work remotely. That's a benefit. But are you positioned in such a way that you can do that? And see, that's what we're about here at Prosperity Homestead. I want you to have your 40 acres and a mule, but be on the path of 50 acres, 250 acres, 500 acres, even a 1,000-acre plan. Why? Because if you're properly stewarding the land and you're getting recreational value from it without destroying it, and you're getting hunting value by keeping the wildlife in check, you're allowing natural habitats that are truly natural, not cultivated like a national forest, you're going to do more for the environment than Greenpeace and Greta Thunberg and all these other people put together. Now, this will require fossil fuels, but you'll have such a carbon offset that in some cases, maybe that $40 an acre is coming from carbon credits. Now, I have a report on how to make money from your land, and it's kind of in a draft form, but if you send in some questions, I'll be more than happy to send you a manuscript so that you can take a look at that, at least give you an excerpt from it, because this is so important. The small farm of today that can consistently grow, that can stay in business, and this could be ecotourism, by the way. This doesn't have to be farming. It doesn't have to be anything. It could be a cottage in the woods where you're doing sewing and crafts. It's really up to you as an individual. But the success factors are few. You need a design plan. You need to help the land express itself. You need to make sure that you're doing things that improve the broad scope of ecology, and that ultimately that you have a plan that cash flows, because there's a lot of wonderful things. I don't know if you've been on any of the homesteading forums, but there's a lot of wonderful things people want to do, but they're not realistic in the application. Either they don't have the time to implement them, they don't have the skills, and they don't have the follow through, because it is frustrating. Now, here's what happens in the information marketing world: that stimulates the sale of classes and homesteading conferences and all these things. There's nothing wrong with those things. You can go learn. But if you don't have a solid plan, where are you going to apply that information? So it doesn't matter if you have 5 acres or 500 acres. We start with your goals and objectives. We keep in mind that this land is changing over time and that we're very insignificant when it comes to the land. But if we do things in a certain way, it takes less energy to work with land than it does to shape land to our demands. So there is some First Nations concept in there, and we do have spiritual retreats and hiking and nature walks where we talk a little bit about that connection humans have with nature. If you want to go down that path, that's great. But industrial farming is not producing the revenue that's necessary to be sustainable over time, and it degrades the land. And then we haven't learned from our mistakes of before, where we cut down all the trees, we farmed the land to degradation, and then we ended up having to turn that land over for pennies on the dollar to some federal government who now has a Bureau of Land Management, and now it's such a political hardship about what that land goes. My dream for you is that you own this land and keep it in your family forever. That your children learn the methods to keep the land and never lose it, to cultivate the land so that it's available for quail, it's available for deer hunting, it's available for all these other outdoor activities, that they have a conservation attitude, and that they have a consistent and long-term cash flow from land. There are people making six-figure incomes on less than 5 acres. Okay. Now, again, this depends, just like the trees, that to have a healthy tree, it depends on a lot of factors. To have a healthy homestead, it depends on your geographic location. It depends on your skill set. It depends on a lot of factors. Those are things that we're going to cover here on Prosperity Homestead. I'm Justin Hitt, and if you have any questions about what I covered today, or even the skills that are necessary to run at least a break-even homestead, be sure to ask in the comments. Go visit www.prosperityhomestead.org. Go to the contact page and ask your questions. Not only do I love to receive your questions, but it gives me an opportunity to either create more content or to help newsletter subscribers or individuals like yourself be more aware of the content that's already available. There are resources. Now, again, some of the things that I talk about are confusing and frustrating, because I'm not saying you can't cut the trees down. But what I'm saying is that you're going to be able to get the same benefit as cutting the trees down with a properly managed set of land. And some people don't know they want to own land, and some people greatly desire owning land, but it doesn't really matter where you are. If you do it the wrong way, it costs you a lot more. Now, it costs the environment hundreds of years of recovery. So we do want to make sure you understand that as well. But there is so much that land can provide to you, and it's better for you to have it and own it than it for to go into some land trust or go into some Bill Gates buying it, or some city buying it, or some federal organization buying it and not cultivating it to what it's best suited for. Again, there's folks all over the spectrum on this, but what I'm advocating is responsible stewardship of land that maintains high ecological and environmental benefit while still serving the owner of the property. If the owner of the property and their family is getting benefit out of this, it's going to flow over into the community. You're going to be a great example of what can be done with land, and then other owners around you will start stewarding their land as well. Once you start building that multi-generational ownership, you're passing wealth to your children, or it could just be in a family trust or a foundation. We can talk about that some other time. But ultimately, that is going to do more in this world, in your lifetime, to improve the economy, to improve the environment, to improve, to fight climate change if that's something you're interested in, to ultimately build for you a prosperous homestead. Again, I'm Justin Hitton. I'm more than delighted to answer your questions, and I do a lot of research and a lot of actual practical applications. So be sure you check out our YouTube channel. Be sure you like and subscribe, and definitely visit the website at www.prosperityhomestead.org, where there's many more free resources. But do go to the contact page and let us know your questions, comments, concerns. Even if you want me to just verify something for you, I would be more than happy to, because this is going to make a difference to your family. This is going to make a difference to your legacy. This is going to be something that is going to just transform your community. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next podcast.